on your end?
I got it.
Okay. This is my partner here, Matt Layton.
Hey, Matt.
I started the school with Matt,
Nice.
last year. So we're into our second year.
Oh, no, that's right. Yeah.
In Iowa City. So, we're looking to get back at it as soon as we possibly can,
Yeah.
But let me introduce you to everybody. Who we got on the line right now is Zach Evanish. I've known him for a long time, and we'll plug his website and books and stuff like that. But Zach is the founder of Underground Strength Gym in New Jersey. He's the author of the Encyclopedia of Underground Strength and Conditioning. That's his most popular book, but he's written, many other books and programs. He's the host of Strong Life podcast, and he trains people of all ages from kids to, seniors. And he works with a lot of wrestlers and combat athletes, all the way from little youth wrestlers to college guys to guys, international wrestlers that are training for world and Olympic championships. And me personally, I've read your book, Zach. I've read Zach's books. I listen to Zach's podcast all the time. It's one of my favorites, and I love what you're about. I love what Zach's about, and the more I read and the more I listened to your podcast, actually just hearing you on some interviews, you did. You were on Mark Smelly Bell's podcast, and those interviews. When I listen to those interviews, that's why I was like, you know what, this guy's awesome. He would just we see eye to eye with a lot of things and how you like to deal with your athletes and stuff like that. And I just love everything that you have to say about strength and conditioning. And I'm looking forward to a really insightful interview here. So
Yeah.
can you tell us a little bit more about your gym?
Sure. So I'm in a location that I opened up right after Hurricane Sandy, which happened in like New Jersey, New York, Connecticut. So I'm in this location a little over 7 years, but the first startup came out of my parents' garage in '02. And then in '03, my fiance and I bought a house, and it was like a complete gut house. We had to, redo the entire thing, but the first thing we redid was the garage. So in 2003, I started training people out of the garage almost every day. And I would work by day as a teacher, and then 5, 6, 7 p.m. I would coach athletes out of my garage, out of the backyard, and then down the street at a playground. And so the garage was set up. It looked like a professional studio. I had it painted very nice. I had kind of these old school golden era bodybuilders, Dave Draper, Arnold, those guys were on the wall. And then I got into, in those early 2000s, Jim, as you know, you and I have actually crossed a lot of similar paths, but it's interesting. Like we always were kind of like a year or two apart from one another and doing certain things. So those early 2000s was the early days of NHB fighting, as you recall, where a lot of wrestlers, it was not even called MMA. We were getting into, in the late 90s, early 2000s, grappling. They didn't call it even Jiu-Jitsu very much. So I got into that as a segue from wrestling while also training a lot of wrestlers. And so my startup of training was like a blend of Rocky IV, a blend of what I saw the Russian wrestlers doing, and then that golden era bodybuilding of the 60s and 70s. And, you and I have spoken about Diamond Gym. So that style of training. And my backyard was like, I had a tree with a climbing rope. I had a tree that we had cut down, so we had a stump there with a sledgehammer. We would carry the tree logs. The garage had kegs and kettlebells. I mean, kettlebells in the early 2000s, they didn't even know what they were called. People were calling them kettlebells and cowbells. They didn't know what it was. It was such a, unique time. And so the first startup was really out of the parents' garage. And then the first gym I got, my first small warehouse, like a garage, was 2007. It was an old auto garage. And what's interesting is the auto garage shut down. The gym next to it rented the building and turned it into like a fitness boot camp type thing because that was popular. That went under, and then it was like an illegal gambling place. So when I went to like check the place out, there was like poker tables. The windows were tinted out. It was like an underground gambling operation. And I remember like the place looked huge compared to my 2-car garage, high ceilings. But I kind of just like closed my eyes and I envisioned what I could do. They had a steel beam down the center, and I was like, oh man, I'm going to hang ropes and thick handles from this for climbing and grip strength. And so that was, even in 2007, that was like May or June. I rented it in like mid-May and got it open by like June 1st. People had never seen that before. We were flipping tires, pulling sleds, and we were kind of a shock to everybody. And that's where that word underground came, was people would ask, like, what, how do you describe your training? And I'd say, well, we're pretty much underground, man. I don't really follow any rules. People, if I was talking to like a father, he would know when I was saying, oh, I follow the Russian conjugate method, and I'm, modeling my training off of what the Soviets did with their youth athletes. They wouldn't know what I was saying. So that word underground just kind of stuck. And so here we are, 2020, man, it's like, 18 years of doing this, for a while. And then I got into the college scene. 2014 was at Lehigh with their wrestling team for a year. And then 2017 through like the end of 2018, like a year and a half at Rutgers with their wrestling team. And so I've always had the gyms, and then there's always been another coaching thing going on by day. So sometimes I train like 200 athletes in a day. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, you worked with John Hughes then.
Oh, yes.
Out at Lehigh, and I mean, as far as strength training goes, that guy, I could say that guy saved my life, because he's the guy that really helped me out the most with strength training for my neck, and I was just obsessed with it. And he helped. I went to a wrestling camp, and he was there. He was one of the clinicians, and I was just hounding him every day. I just wanted to work. He was one of my favorite wrestlers. I'm a PA,
Right.
and
where did you grow up in PA? Where were you?
I'm from a town called Levittown, PA.
Yes.
It's in
Yeah.
between, in between Philly and Jersey.
Yep.
And but yeah, like I was at a camp. The camp was in Virginia, but John Hughes was a Penn State guy.
Yes.
At the time, and he helped me out so much with my neck training. He showed me a bunch of exercises, and I just did them religiously every day. And I had some bad injuries with my neck, and the muscles in my neck were able to help me.
You broke your neck, right?
Yeah,
Did you break your neck?
Yeah, I broke it. I broke it
in high school or college?
High school.
I kind of know your history, Jim. You and I always kind of like, you were bodybuilding, then I may have been bodybuilding right after you, and we kind of came across each other with all these things. We actually had like a brief meeting when I went down to a Dan Kennedy seminar that Lloyd invited me to. It would have probably been the fall of 2007, maybe 2008.
Yeah. That was a long time ago. Well, kind of, not that long.
12 years, bro.
Yeah, it's cool, man. And it's been cool seeing your gym building up, and then even like how your podcast has developed, and you're just like a content creating machine. And
I just approach everything with a wrestling mindset. So of course, being around brands and being around Coach Gable, I tell you what changed my life was actually my senior year. One of the kids on my team, he gave me he exchanged Dan Gable's Competitor Supreme VHS tape to me, and I gave him the Ohio State wrestling one. And so every day, I didn't even have a VHS player at my house. I would go to my friend's house up the street, And I'm like, can I watch, my tape in your house? Like, yes, you can watch your wrestling tape. It was like 90 days in a row of me watching Dan Gable Competitor Supreme. And Brands and Gable and everybody in that tape was saying, you got to outwork the competition. And of course, that may have kind of worked against me with some injuries because of how crazy I went. But with work ethic, I learned so much from that tape and from my wrestling coaches that I just, every day I have to get something done. So I filmed some videos while I trained. This morning I got other videos done. I got an email out. Every day, I'm doing something to get better. It's the same as probably what you're saying to your students in the academy. It's the same as what a coach is going to talk to his athletes about who wants them to be great. How do you get ahead every day? And so, if I'm not making, especially, I don't have a videographer or somebody who's helping me with content. I'm a one-man army. So I have to put out the content to make up for the lack of kind of, film editing and all that stuff. So, and then kind of back to John Hughes, when I was at Lehigh, it's interesting. He is the head associate coach, and there's always a coach on a team where the kids are kind of afraid of him. And so when he would kind of walk in the weight room, everybody kind of perked up and did a little bit more, just kind of like a little less talking. And I saw that like his presence really had an impact on them. And so he also reminded me of when I was at Rutgers, Donnie Pritzloff. Same thing. The kids were afraid of him. And so I would always get into a lot of these training conversations with Donnie and Hughes. And, John, I don't know if he grew up on a farm, but I know his brother who coaches at not Binghamton, at Bloomsburg, he owned or owns a farm. And he would tell me how in the summer he'd bring the kids there to clean out the farm and wrestle with the pigs. And that was a common thing, I think, for that area that he was in Pennsylvania, was that farm area is where these guys, is why Pennsylvania has always been and will always be so dominant, because it's an area where the kids are required to do manual labor. Whereas, dude, I'm in a beach town. It's too comfortable for everybody. And I always say, like, comfort is the enemy when you're trying to become great at something. That's the tough thing when you're an athlete. So, I try to still do those things daily to make myself uncomfortable. It could be little things too, like waking up earlier than I wanted to, or doing something extra, just little stuff that adds up, So it's been kind of a mindset I acquired from wrestling.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're dealing with, I mean, all kinds of kids and all kinds of athletes, but let's focus a little bit for now on just training young wrestlers, or even like young jiu-jitsu athletes.
Sure.
So, like, what do you think the difference is, strength training wise, between a kid, let's say age 5 to 10, 6 to 10. I mean, 5 is real young, but like, let's say
Yes.
6 to 10. The difference between them, let's say, lifting or necessarily strength training, and then a kid age like 10 to 14, because there's arguments back and
Yes.
forth with little kids shouldn't lift, or young kids shouldn't lift until maybe they start puberty, or right when they're right around there. What are your thoughts on that?
You got a couple things there. So, you have these kids that get involved with jiu-jitsu and wrestling at a younger age. They develop a different mindset than, let's say, a kid who's playing soccer, or another sport that's maybe non-combative. And so that's why I think what we do attracts the wrestlers. So normally I don't like to accept a kid in my gym until middle school, meaning you got to be in 6th grade. I need you to be at least 11 years old, mainly because I don't want them doing something so organized. I want them more involved with gymnastics, calisthenics. What I tell parents in those elementary school years is I say, listen, go get a climbing rope and hang it from your basement or your garage, even if it's not a high ceiling, and just leave it there. Don't tell your kid to do 5 climbs. Don't tell them how much or when to do it. Let him explore. Okay? Let him be involved with multiple sports. So not just wrestling. Do soccer, then wrestling, then play lacrosse, baseball, multiple sports that are going to build athleticism. You know, my son plays baseball and I always bust on him. Like, they're not like running or doing all of these activities, but I want to see kids moving. Even if you're in wrestling, like, you know, at the wrestling club by me, a lot of kids go there. They have a judo instructor there. And so I feel like the best thing for those kids to do, and the best kids who do it, is they do judo during some time of the year. So they don't just wrestle year round, but they're on the mat pretty frequently. Once the kid gets the mindset that he is ready to train, then you could train, and now it's a matter of how you train them. So during those middle school years, I don't do any spinal loading. I don't put a bar on their back. I don't want to say I never trap bar deadlift, because we have kids here. Let's say a kid is in 7th grade. He's 13, but he's built better than a 15-year-old, and he's been training for 2 years. Well, he's developed mentally, emotionally, and physically. He's ready to do some light barbell work. So if he does a back squat, he won't add weight. He'll use like 65 pounds for 5 sets of 5. Same weight for all sets. Or he'll deadlift 1 plate on each side, 5 sets of 5. The key is they never struggle. They're not grinding out reps. And so when parents think of strength training, they immediately think squat deadlift, because they don't know. They don't understand anything about training. Whereas for me, my philosophy with the younger kids is they're never grinding. They don't touch the barbell during middle school. Not never. You know, you got to be, like I said, you have to have the training age and the biological age. So that's why, and you've seen it because you've been around wrestling and jiu-jitsu, you've been around athletics. Why do some 13-year-olds look like they're 16 and vice versa? They have a higher biological age. They've gone through puberty faster. You know, I train 16-year-olds that are still wrestling at the 106-pound weight class. You know, that's honestly not really, that shouldn't be normal, but we see it more because kids don't know how to eat, parents don't know how to feed them, and then kids are afraid to gain weight because they know that the lighter weights strength is a big factor. And so, you know, going back to it, bottom line is these youth kids, they're just playing with the training. They're just playing with the kettlebells, throwing med balls, climbing ropes. It should look more like physical culture than strength and conditioning. And then this big foundation has been built, so when they get to the high school, they're going to be ready. But if they haven't been trained the right way, they won't be ready. So, you know, I got hired at this high school, and for the first 2 months, we didn't even touch a bar. They did goblet squats with a dumbbell. It was dumbbell bench, recline row, pull-up, push-up, walking lunges, hill sprints, throwing medicine balls, a lot of carrying of kettlebells from different positions. I actually had to do that at Lehigh when I got there because the guys were not, they had strength, wrestling strength, but they didn't have the kind of strength needed for power cleans and back squats and deadlifts. So I built them up to it, which goes to show you that room had like 3 All-Americans when I got there, maybe 4 All-Americans. And the whole room was filled with kids that were like 2-time state champs, 4-time All-State, but they couldn't do a proper deadlift. So for 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, they were doing sleds, kettlebells, calisthenics. So sometimes it's not so much he's old enough to do it, is are you strong enough? And then the emotional aspect is you need some crazy focus when you're squatting with a bar or doing a trap bar deadlift. You need to be coachable and learn how to put your body in position. And so, you know, it's like wrestling. Why do certain, you know, I always say, like, you want to get a great high school program, then get a great feeder program. So when the kids show up, they could do high crotch, double, front headlock, stand, switch, sit, you know, on top. They know 2 to 3 breakdowns. They know cradles from different positions, different arm bars. You know, we want like 3 moves from top, bottom, neutral, and we want to know position. Now I send them to the high school, and bang, they could take off to the next level. That's how I look at training. It's like going to school, kindergarten, you know, 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade. Don't skip grades when it comes to training. So for the youth, it's got to be like, I'll give you guys a show here. I don't know if I could flip my camera around. Oh yeah. So we got a ton of medicine balls here, but we've got, 6-pound med ball up to 150. And I think we even have like a 4-pounder somewhere here. The Bulgarian bags, and then a lot of sleds. They can't mess this up. They just pull them, push them, they sprint, they could go heavy, and it never, it's no spinal loading. It's all push-pull. And then you can't go wrong with jumping rope, right? Herschel Walker can't be wrong. A lot of band work. Our kids do a ton of band exercises with these little mini bands. And then we got a lot of room here to move. So see if I can flip this around. There we go. A lot of room to move where they're doing a lot of skipping, walking on their hands, whether somebody's holding their ankles. It's and then I still do that with the bigger kids too. And then we have a ton of kettlebells. So we start them off kind of like playing and building them up slow and steady. It's really a system. And I just pulled it from what they've been doing, before it was Russia, when it was the Soviet Union. That's how they trained their kids. They did all of that bodyweight movement stuff. And so by the time they were like teenagers, they had developed such a wide array of physical fitness and athleticism that they said, okay, you're built, Jim, you're built for wrestling. That's where you go. Matt, you look like you're gonna be basketball because you're 6'4". So that's how they looked at things. So for me, I kind of model all the training about what the Soviets did with the little kids. It's a proven system. And so lifting weights, I'll say this too before next question. I always tell when a parent of a wrestler says he doesn't want him lifting weights, I go, how long you been wrestling for? Oh, since he was 5. Well, he's been lifting weights since he was 5. He's lifting, another human being. Or if you work on a farm, you're lifting weights. They're not waiting for you to turn 13 before you start picking up the horse crap, or taking the feed out. So sometimes we get too cautious, and that creates weak people. So, the body, the stronger the body, the less likely the athlete to get injured.
Well, we gotta, if we could do this right.
So one of our members, Brian, he that's a great segue into his question. He wants to know if you have any good advice for jiu-jitsu athletes in terms of building strength to prevent injuries, kind of just like you mentioned.
Sure. And by the way, Jim, one of my locations, we're in like a combat facility. We have the wrestling and the jujitsu and boxing. And Vitor Shaolin is the jujitsu instructor.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So Vitor trains with us, and some of his competitors train with us, and we train all of our it's a very general program. It doesn't get too specialized. But one thing I know is, so I have a jujitsu background, not crazy, but I did jujitsu. But because you're on your back so much, and some schools don't do a lot of stand up or takedowns because you have a greater chance of injury unless you're training the competitive guys. So we want to work the muscles you can't see in the mirror. So because you're going to be very frontal, working from your back, you got to strengthen those muscles. So a lot of rowing, a lot of band work. We just hang from a lot of stuff to open up the shoulders, to distract the shoulders and build shoulder health. And then we do a lot of stuff that works the butt, the hamstrings, the lower back. So we'll trap our deadlift. We'll do back extensions. Like, I'll actually give you guys a tour of things that I think are really important for, jiu-jitsu guys. The sleds are going to be great because you could go heavy for strength. You could go lighter and sprint with them for speed, or you could do multiple trips for conditioning, and it doesn't beat up your joints. Back extensions, whether it's on a 45-degree or a horizontal, are going to be crucial for protecting your lower back and your knees. They're going to strengthen your hamstrings, build stability. Rope climbing, of course. We do all kinds of climbing onto the, stall bars, and then different grips for pull-ups. So you got like a thick-handled V-bar, got the hand grenade right here, rowing with the rings, and then we'll lower it for push-ups. And, sandbags I love because of the grip aspect and always picking it up off the ground. Squatting is going to be great. I was deadlifting earlier, and I'm going to show you guys over here. This is going to be, most places won't have a belt squat, but it allows you to squat without beating up your lower back. And then, of course, we do a lot of dumbbell work and a lot of kettlebell training. But really, that's just like a 30-second tour. You want to work the muscles you can't see in the mirror to keep your body healthy. So a lot of stuff for the upper back and shoulders, band work where you're pulling towards the head or pulling away from the body, different rowing exercises. And I like to switch the exercises regularly so your body doesn't develop overuse injuries. So that's why you see different bars here. Even like our training bars are different. So you see a lot of the different grips, and even some of them have like the thick grips. This is a fat bar here. You can see like my fingers almost touch. It's about 2 inches. So thick bars. And then also when we squat, we use the safety bar. It doesn't beat up your shoulders. And so in jiu-jitsu, you still need strong legs. You're going to get a lot of flexibility and mobility just from doing the drills, but then you want to make sure that your backside is strong. And then it really depends on the age of the jiu-jitsu competitor. So we train some guys in their 20s, and then we train guys in their 40s and 50s who compete in jiu-jitsu. And I had a great conversation with my friend. This is going to be a crucial tip. He quoted this. He said, when you're 20, you want to train as if you're 40, because when you're 40, then you'll feel like you're 20. So you're never killing yourself during the strength and conditioning. You're working smart, you're working hard, but if you kill yourself, like a lot of these workouts that are constant circuits and, high reps, you're just doing shitty technique, you're beating up the body, and that's how you get injured. And so you want to, Jim, I say, like, when I trained at Diamond Gym as a bodybuilder, I tried to kill myself there. I tried to outwork everybody. I tried to destroy the gym, and it really beat up my joints. It beat up my shoulder, my knees, because I went so far high with the intensity. And what that does is it does not give you longevity in training because it beats you up. And so I'm really recommending to your students, because I'm sure you've got teenagers and youth, and then you have the adults from their mid-20s to probably guys in their 40s, 50s, maybe 60s. When you're done training, you should leave feeling like you could have done a little more. That's kind of the optimal training that we want.
All right. Well, we had a question too from one of our students about building functional strength. You hear that term all the
Yes.
time, functional strength. And he asked, how do you build functional strength as opposed to, bodybuilding strength? What are your thoughts between, functional versus bodybuilding,
Yeah.
let's say?
Basically, you're trying to get strong in the right exercises that transfer over to sport. And so if we look at the most successful athletes, they're very good at all kinds of calisthenics. They could do pull-ups and push-ups and explosive push-ups. They squat. Squatting is going to be important, whether it's with a bar, dumbbell, kettlebells. Your legs are your foundation, so you need your legs to be strong. I kind of gave you guys the showing of the sandbags and the med balls here. You want to do, I love, just one of my favorite exercises is picking them up off the ground, pulling it over the shoulder, shouldering. So we will use a heavy med ball, or we will use a sandbag, and that develops full body strength right there. And then also we throw the lighter medicine balls, all kinds of different angles. So throwing the medicine ball develops speed because you're releasing it. You're not slowing it down. You don't have weight in your hands. And then carrying things. So we carry kettlebells, dumbbells, sandbags. You saw the water-filled kegs. We carry them, and that develops full body strength. Some people call that functional strength. And I'll tell you, even the bench press is a great exercise if it's done correctly and you counterbalance it. So before we bench, we do things for our back and shoulders to kind of pump up the support muscles behind it. And in jiu-jitsu, I would say you want to do at least, 2 to 1 back to front exercises. You're basically doing double the volume. So let's say before I bench, I might do some kettlebell rowing, and then I might do some band pulling for the shoulders. Then I'm going to bench. So I do a 2 to 1. And then when we bench, we don't go wide. We take a shoulder width or a neutral grip. And why do we need those pressing muscles? Well, if I'm on my back and you're in my guard and I'm shrimping and pushing, I want strong pushing muscles. Or if I'm a wrestler and I'm punching and hand fighting, I need these muscles to be strong. But I don't get too caught up in what tool I'm using. So I just look at this like I'm doing a pressing movement. So we will do weighted push-ups with a chain on the body, chains or bands, band resisted push-ups. Then we also do explosive push-ups where we do clapping and exploding over the med ball. So I like to do the warm-up kind of segues into the explosive work, throwing the med ball, plyometric work, frog jumps, explosive broad jumps. Then we'll do the heavier stuff, whether it's upper or lower body, the barbell work. And then after that, I like to move almost like a circuit, but not with technical movements. So the circuit might be sleds, carries, and some sort of curls. Sleds, carries, back extensions. I don't do like power cleans plus sleds plus overhead pressing, because now I'm taking like power clean is a technical movement that should be done early in the workout where you have proficiency and technique. And then your best strength comes through the sport. So nothing replaces wrestling practice to get in wrestling shape. Nothing replaces drilling with jiu-jitsu and rolling. That is what gets you in jiu-jitsu shape. So you have to have the specificity, whereas the strength work is it's your general physical work.
Right. And so what do you think some of the mistakes that what do you think some of the mistakes are that kids make?
The mistakes that kids are making is, and I saw this firsthand because first year at this high school, my first 2 weeks, they didn't really give me a schedule. And I remember asking kids when I got there, hey guys, I'm Coach Evanesh. I'm the new strength coach here. Do you guys want to train with me? I'm going to, next week we'll have the schedule, but I'll take you through a workout. And they'd be like, no, I'm good. I'm on my own program. So I'm thinking to myself, oh, maybe they have a program from their sport coach, or maybe they saw something online. And then these kids would do a few shitty sets of benching. And I'm talking like turning their heads, squirming, failing under the bar. And then they would go and curl for like 25, 35 minutes. And I was like, what the shit is this? So when I finally had teams on schedule, I said to the guys, I go, guys, I've been watching you train for 2 weeks, and I got a couple things that I've been thinking about. I said, number one, anytime I asked you guys to train with me, everybody said they're on their own program. Nobody squatted. You guys all did benching and curls. I go, number two, do you know what else I felt when I saw you train? They're like, no, what? I said, I threw up in my mouth. That's what I told them, because it was so horrible. Nobody trained the back of the body. They did all pressing and curling. So once I'm doing all this and my body starts going here, start getting shoulder issues. If your back is not strong, I always say, like, you want to see a strong athlete, look at his legs, his back, and big butt muscles. And my buddy who played in the NFL 9 years, he always said, Zach, he goes, anytime I saw a guy with like big chest and biceps, but like kind of skinny legs, small back, he's like, that was an easy paycheck. He goes, but when I saw a guy that had like burly looking body, big back, big legs, big glutes, he's like, I knew I was going to earn my paycheck that day. He's like, because they looked like they had farm boy strength. So the mistakes are they don't squat. If they squat, they don't squat all the way down. They do half reps to kind of satisfy the ego. Sometimes we have kids that train at their high school. A kid will squat 185, 225 for like a triple. But then he tests at school and squatted 365. I'm like, how do you add 200 pounds in 2 weeks. You didn't do it right. And so you're either doing it right or you're not doing it right. So we should see kids being able to master all calisthenics. You know, if you're under 200 pounds, you should be banging out double-digit pull-ups. You should be doing 10, 12. You know, when I was 15, weighing 150, I could do 25 pull-ups. And then even weighing 225, I was always able to do 20-plus pull-ups until I had shoulder surgery. So young high school kids, even the heavy guys, should be able to do pull-ups, full range bodyweight squat. Believe it or not, a lot of kids struggle on a full range bodyweight squat. Their hips and ankles are so tight, they look like they're like caving in. So, and then the other thing is can you move your body? Can you sprint? You know, running, jumping over things. And of course, you know, walking on your hands, push-ups, pull-ups, all of those bodyweight exercises, they should be crushing. They should think like Herschel Walker. And then when it starts time to start training, they should not be doing a bodybuilder split like what you and I did. Chest and bis, shoulders, tris, legs, then back, or back and bis. They should think full body workouts or upper body, lower body. And even when I do a lower body workout with the athletes, the warm-up has some calisthenics with the upper body, and they're probably going to get some carries in, which works the full body. So now lower body's like a full body day. On upper body day, the warm-up is probably going to have jump training in it. And so we're working the legs, and then they're going to probably finish with sprinting. And so even though it's a upper body training day, we still get some lower body work. So it's preparing their body for the rigors of sport. And then the last big mistake is too much machines, too much sitting down, laying down, and really no intensity. You know, I've gone to some of these local gyms when I was take my daughter to the tennis. I'd go to like a local gym, a Crunch or this one gym I think shut down. It was called Pearl Street Gym. Everybody's on their phone. I mean, people don't even get off the benches. They like bench, then they just lay there, pick up their phone, and it's like, dude, you're doing nothing. For 5 minutes, you're sitting there. So I tell athletes, you need to get away from comfort. You want to train at Retro Fitness because you and your friends could bullshit and screw around. But when you're training with me, you squat, then you spot, then you're jumping, then you're doing pull-ups, then you're back in it, then you do that again, but instead of pull-ups, you're doing push-ups. It's work. And so there's a lack of intensity, there's a lack of correct exercise selection, there's lack of technique, and there's too much work on the front when the work should be focused on what they can't see in the mirrors: the back, the triceps, the lower back, the glutes, and the hamstrings.
Let me ask you this with the back, because, you know, if you're stuck at home, let's say you don't have access to a gym, you got to get a workout in, but you should have a pull-up bar. At the very least, you should have a pull-up bar.
Most kids don't.
You know,
most kids don't.
Most kids do not. So what kind of creative ways have you do you have that kids can use their back muscles with at home, let's say, when they don't have a pull-up bar, their parents haven't gotten them a pull-up bar,
right?
Stuff like that.
Couple things. So I did this when I was training at my parents' backyard. We took a beach towel. The tree was lower. We slung the beach towel over it and did pull-ups. But now let's say we have football players who weigh 250, 240. Well, go to Home Depot, get a long rope, and lay back and just row. You know, do the rowing. The other option is, you know, the schools are closed, but some of the playgrounds are open. Find a playground with the monkey bars. Do your pull-ups on the monkey bars, or even like, you know, let me see if I can set this up. They can go kind of like getting into like these lower positions here where they have to row with one arm. And you know who I saw doing that was, there's that documentary called Pulling John. The guy who was the arm wrestler who was like undefeated for 20 years. He wasn't lifting weights. He would go to the playground and kind of like one arm pull his body. So what I would do though is get towels or go to Home Depot, go get a thick rope, You know, the rope probably has to be about 12 feet long, depending on how high you sling the rope over. And now you're going to pull. Like, we have these ropes here. Man, I bought these ropes so long ago. But I remember I would throw these ropes over the pull-up bars, and then you'd have one. This is like a 2-inch rope. You could get an inch and a half. And I don't even think Home Depot has an 1.5 inch rope. They probably have 1-inch rope. But you go to a hardware store. You could even go to online and buy what's called toe straps. Go to like an auto mechanic store and buy toe straps that's normally used, like they put them on the front of like Jeeps and trucks for towing. You get toe straps, and now you got your rowing exercises. And so there's a lot of ways to work. You know, my parents' backyard had all these stones. I would do bent over row with the stones. And then for leg work, let's say you have no equipment. Well, ask mom or dad, hey, let's go to an empty parking lot, shut the car off, put it in neutral, put your hands behind the car, and push. Get a couple sets of like 100, 150 feet leg pushing. That's going to be your leg work. And then what do you add to that? Sprinting, frog jumps, squat jumps, lunge jumps, walking lunges, reverse lunges, forward lunges, lateral lunges, you know, the Cossack squats where you're doing the lateral deep squat. There's like 10 things you could do right there with no equipment. And then of course you could build a sandbag. You can build equipment. People just have to want to get strong, and then it inspires you to make stuff, because buying equipment right now is not a good idea. People are, you know, price gouging on Facebook because of supply and demand. Right. When you look on Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace. So start making stuff, and if you just get a rope or a long towel, you could work your back. I mean, you could get great workouts pushing a car and doing calisthenics.
All right. So you worked with lots of parents over the years.
Yes.
Too, and I've listened to some great interviews you've done and podcast episodes that you've done where you've really hammered, you know, working with parents and working, what are the ideal parents you want to work with. And so right. I say I got two questions. I'll just put them both together and you can go off on it.
Sure.
What do you think the biggest mistakes that parents make, the ones that you've dealt with over the years? And
yep.
then also, what's the ideal parent that you would want to work with as a coach?
So big mistakes that parents make is if they don't have any knowledge and they're trying to tell you what to do, they've been kind of caught up with the buzzwords. You know, they'll say things like, you know, a kid is in 8th grade and they'll say he doesn't need to work on strength. He needs speed and agility. So it's like, all right, your son's 150 pounds. I don't understand how we don't need to do any strength work. You know, they're just confused. They don't really know what to do. They've come across so much misinformation that they start kind of telling you crazy talk. The other thing is lack of consistency, especially in season. So the sports season begins, they immediately kind of have this like breakdown of like, we're so busy, he had to do his homework in the car, we have to stop. And it just, that goes completely against what you want to do, because, you know, we're talking wrestling, so we'll stick with that theme. Wrestling starts right the week of Thanksgiving, and then you have the district tournament mid-February. So we're going to say December, January, mid-February, 10 weeks of no strength work. I've lost a lot of what I've worked for. Why would I want to stop the very thing that I did 8 months, 9 months of? Now I'm going to stop doing it in season, but I trained to compete. So in season, there should always be training. When I was at this high school, we would train the wrestling team twice a week at about 25-minute clips. Real simple stuff, strength and power-based work. At my gym, you know, people have to travel here. So that kind of creates a little bit of an obstacle. But the bottom line is, look, are we training to win, or are we training to be good enough? And so year-round training is the mistake most parents make. They bail out in season. Number two, they kind of try to tell the coach what needs to be done, when, look, I need to see how your son moves in sport and in the weight room. I need to see what's weak. It allows me to visually assess the athlete. And then the other thing is, those weaknesses change because kids are growing. So maybe a kid gains 30 pounds or goes through this massive growth spurt. Well, now he needs more kind of like coordination work, and he doesn't need any barbell training because he's heavy. He's gained 30 pounds. He's lost some of that speed that we want him to have. So now I have to change things. So sometimes dads don't know what they're talking about. If I'm going to talk to a dad, I want to talk to a dad who's been an elite athlete. And even then, elite athletes are not really the best versed in training because they were so naturally gifted. My wrestling coach tells me, he goes, Zach, in the 90s and the 80s, the athletes who were winning, basically they went through puberty earlier. They were just strong and tough compared to the guys that did not. He goes, now the technical aspect is so high, and you, of course, have kids, doing more than one repeat year. You have seniors who are 19. I was a 19-year-old junior in college. You have high school seniors who are 19. You're a different animal when you're 19 and a half compared to when you're 16 and a half. It's a man versus boy. So those are really the common mistakes, is that parents don't really understand legit performance training. And unfortunately, even people that own gyms, it's so easy to open a gym now. Like a lot of them don't really know what athletes need. I mean, I've seen Division I strength coaches highlight videos, or like their kids they're bouncing off the box for a box squat. They're not sitting back. All these details really tell me what kind of knowledge the person has. And so, I'm just going to hammer it home. Year-round consistency is the ticket, and allowing the coach to assess and create something for the kid. So we have a group training model, but there's a lot of individual things going on during the group. The group is utilized for the energy, but then each person needs to do something that's best suited for his or her body when we're training. We'll have in the same group a college athlete with a middle school athlete. So it's the ability to kind of organize and command the room. But big mistake is lack of consistency. And we're going to see that in the fall, especially with football, who has been finding a way to train versus who has not. The schools are shut down. It's going to be real interesting. I don't know if you go to any high school football games out there in Iowa, but you guys, the whole country's in the same boat where we're on lockdown. The kids who have maybe some gym equipment at home, not everybody's training. So once September games start happening, we're going to see who was training.
Yeah, I mean, we have, I work with Iowa wrestlers a lot out here.
Yep.
They're in a tough spot. Their season got canceled, and Carver Hawkeye Arena, which is the house that Gable built,
Yep.
unbelievably just completely shut down. I think it's open now, but it's just open for maybe staff or something like that.
Right.
But the athletes can't be going up in there and working out yet. Hopefully that's going to change. Hopefully it'll change within the next week or two.
Yeah.
But as of right now, they're not allowed in there. They have to be training on their own. And the Brands brothers, the coaching staff, is real big on independence, and these guys get
Correct.
on their own. But it's a good point you made. Is next season, during all these sports seasons, things get back to normal. You're going to see who has stayed engaged, who has kept training, and who just let themselves go completely. And it can happen at every level. Even, I mean, you have guys right now, and women too. You have athletes that are training to win world and Olympics, and they, if they were training for the Olympics, they were getting ready for the 2020 Olympic trials to make the team first. Got to make the team first, right? Now, Olympics got postponed for a year. It's going to be 2021 Olympics. So now their whole training cycle and their peaking phase and different things like that got thrown off. They have to reevaluate, structure everything. But a lot of that has to be done on their own because maybe they can't even get into the facility that they want to train. And, we have a jiu-jitsu school out here, and it's the same thing. We've been keeping our students engaged online and providing them content like this, like interviewing you. You're an expert in your field of strength and conditioning and stuff like that, and providing them with that kind of knowledge. But it's up to them to apply it on their own. And we can hope as coaches that our students are taking good care of themselves during this really tough time, right?
I think the kind of kid that Iowa attracts to their college wrestling program, that's a special kid in and of itself. So it's very likely those kids are finding a way to chop wood and chop up tree logs and do squats with them. But look, I have a couple friends in the NFL, and they're concerned that some of those guys are not working. Some of those guys don't even own dumbbells, right? So it's the wrestler mentality is always unique. They're always special, but kids are kids, and I still don't relate to it because normal for me as a teenager was running, riding bikes, lifting weights. My brother always had weights. My friend up the street had weights. We did those things, but we're in a different world now, and so not everybody has these things, and they just work differently. Like, I don't want to hold a Zoom class and tell them what to follow along with. It's just not my style. I don't want them waiting for me to hold a Zoom class to do squats and push-ups and sprints. I want them to do it on their own. And so I'm willing to kind of like not follow what every other, whatever strength coach, fitness coach is doing, because I'm training our athletes to not rely on me ever. That's where I don't want them to be. It's kind of like goes opposite of running a business, but that's the mindset I want them to have. I'm sure Tom and Terry don't want their guys to only train because I'm calling him up on Friday, so he has to tell me. No, like, do it on your own. We're not going to tell you what to do. You guys know you need to work.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you say that because when I started Eastern Iowa Wrestling Club with Terry Brands, we started that club together. Terry and I were the founders of that club. I moved on from that club to concentrate on starting Citadel Jiu-Jitsu with Matt here, and with Terry, his big thing was building independence in his athletes, even at a really young age.
Yes.
And I always touch on, independence is not know-it-all. If you're independent, that doesn't mean that you're a know-it-all, and you should never be a know-it-all.
Right, never.
But it means that you can get it in on your own, and it takes a lot of coaching and a lot of trust in your environment and a coach to be able to get to that point of independence. So a big part of that club and working with Terry was just also, it was the same thing that you're talking about, is letting them know, like, hey, I don't need to be in your corner.
Yes.
My job is to get you to the point where you're proficient enough with your wrestling and you're good enough and you're confident enough that you can go to a tournament without a coach. If I'm talking about Matt here, my partner, if I'm talking about Matt Layton, he's been able to win at a high level and travel around and win medals at these high-level jiu-jitsu events, and he's traveling around. He's going by himself. He's gotten himself to the point that he doesn't necessarily need a coach in his corner. That's like icing on the cake almost, if you got
that. Yeah,
and that's the kind
great.
of stuff that you're doing. You're coaching these guys. It might take a long time, or some good amount of time to get an athlete to that point. There has to be a relationship built over time to be able.
There's a lot behind that. It takes, like, what's the environment at their house like? What is their sport coach like? So for me, we're in a pretty strong wrestling area. We're in this is called the Shore Conference, the Jersey Shore area. The team in my town stinks so bad. Like, I would tell these kids, don't even come to me. You got to go to a wrestling club. That's where your time needs to be spent. And then we have other kids that are going to they're at a high school where the practices are brutal, but they don't get any strength work. All right, then you got to come here. And then there's the thing, what happens when you stop training in season? Are you doing something that's truly productive? If yes, then we're in a good place. But if you just stop, that makes no sense. And so that's the frustrating thing is like, man, we just trained for 9 months and now you're not going to train at all. It's almost like it's actually stupid. That's what it is.
Right. Well, we touched on this a lot already, but I'm just going to ask you this, and you can fire off maybe just a quick answer. But which grappling exercises do you think give you the most bang for your buck? Let's say your top 3 most important exercises for wrestlers or jiu-jitsu athletes. To me, it's pretty much the same. Jiu-jitsu athletes and wrestling. When I'm talking about wrestling strength, it's jiu-jitsu strength and vice versa. What do you think?
Yeah, I hate saying this, but it's like it's not a cop out, but it depends. It depends on that individual athlete and where he is weak. So we're going to work on where they're weak at. But for the most part, it's going to be some sort of a pulling exercise. Could be a rope climb, could be weighted pull-ups, could be some sort of a kettlebell or dumbbell row, but it's going to be some pulling exercise. Then it's going to be something for lower body. And the trap bar deadlift has been just a staple in our training. It doesn't beat up the lower back. It's like a half squat, so it gets you extremely strong. And then the third exercise is going to be some sort of like a full body movement, like a dumbbell clean and press or a medicine ball clean and throw, something that's more aggressive and explosive. So those 3 exercises tend to be big staples in all my training programs. Some sort of a pulling exercise, a trap bar deadlift, and then a full body movement like a clean and press, or a med ball shoulder, or pick up that med ball and throw it, something aggressive like that.
Right. And those, even just going off those 3 exercises, you could pick from tons of them, but just from those 3, and I like what you said with, it's got to be based on the individual. That's really the best way to do it. That's how I like to coach as well. And with jiu-jitsu and strength and conditioning, wrestling, all of it. But, you can pick those top 3 exercises and then just look, okay, like out of those top 3, which one do I need the most work on? Are my legs getting tired? Or is my back, are my grips burning?
Right.
It's funny. I talked to some athletes the other day. This was yesterday. I was on an interview with Eastern Iowa Wrestling Club. They had me back on to talk to their athletes, and I said the same thing. You just pick these exercises where, when you're wrestling, how do you feel? Are your lungs getting tired?
Yes.
Grip getting tired? Are your legs getting tired? If you don't like how that feels, then you need to put more time into developing that
That's right.
area and really turn that into like one of your strengths, and it's going to make you really uncomfortable doing that.
It's funny, like kids don't get that. I remember, when I was at the high school, I would get like the team in halves. So I'd get the freshmen and the JV guys, then I'd get the varsity guys. And I remember at the end, I'd say, guys, how many of you, lost a match this week or last week? If you raise your hand, all right, good. How many of you stayed after practice for 5 minutes or 10 minutes to work on where you're struggling? Okay, struggling. Are you struggling to get takedowns? Have you stayed after for 5 minutes to do any speed drilling? Have you stayed after to escape on bottom? No. Well, then I told him, I go, then you don't want to win because you're losing for a certain reason, and then you're not doing anything about it. You're following the same plan that got you where you were. And so if somebody's gassing out a lot, for me, it's going to be hill sprints. It's going to be speed drilling, which I think, you could do that in jiu-jitsu, of course, and wrestling. Speed drilling is brutal. I remember Rob Cole did this at a camp we did in Vermont, called it the hands-on drill. So your hand never leaves the guy. So if I'm drilling takedowns on you, I take you down, I lift you, I bring you down, you cut. My hand is still on your head. I never lose contact with you. It is crazy fatiguing, and that's the best conditioning for wrestling. And so jujitsu would be the same difference, like speed drilling. Legs are always getting tired. Okay, we have to do hill sprints or sprint repeats with incomplete recovery, or we have to do sleds, but maybe suicide sled sprints. Like, I got the beams here, so it's like you sprint to one beam, go back, sprint to the next beam, go back, sprint to the end, go back. You got to train the body to like destroy your weak areas.
Right. Even that hands-on drill that you're talking about, out here in Iowa, we call it the Domination Drill. That's what Gable called it.
Nice.
And, they stick with that. And that's the same thing. And that was one of the staple drills that for the more advanced, especially for the more not necessarily advanced, but once they get a little bit more proficient, where they can keep their hands on and their partner is strong and tough, and they can execute pretty well while keeping their hands on constantly at a high pace. That it's like so good for athletes. I even have our jiu-jitsu athletes do that drill here too, as part of when we're running competition practices sometimes.
Yes.
Just the normal practices sometimes it will be like, hey, keep your hands on your partner, keep gripping. You have to have both hands working the whole time, and then the other person, it's just say, hey, stay tough in there. The person's executing on you, but you got to stay tough, keep getting up, stuff like that. Give them a good feel.
You have to be a great training partner.
Yeah. And so we're almost finished here. I don't want to take up too much of your time, Zach, even though I can go like one of these Hogan episodes and do like 3 or 4 hours with you. But I love talking to you about this stuff. But you're an avid reader. I love your social media a lot, because not only are you posting about all this great training stuff and just just like success and in all areas, like your whole thing is, strong mind, strong body, strong life. That's like your I don't know about catchphrase, whatever you want to call it, like slogan. Even on your website, it says that, but you're an avid reader. You're always posting books. What books have made the biggest impact on you that you would recommend for the jiu-jitsu students here at Citadel BJJ?
Man, it's tough because I don't just, limit my book to training, but I feel like No BS Time Management from Dan Kennedy was a game changer for me. I think it's more applicable now with how people will literally waste hours of their day scrolling through Instagram and Facebook and not being productive with that time. So No BS Time Management by Dan Kennedy. Probably buy it used on Amazon for like $3. Turning Pro by Stephen Pressfield really set me off. I mean, just keeping the book on my desk fires me up to be extremely productive. And then I'd like to share a training book. I'm trying to think of like a training book that really, will be. I love so many training books. One that would be so influential. This is a tough one. A training book that I really love would be, man.
The underground encyclopedia of strength and conditioning.
I really think that my book would be, of course, great for them because I blended the life with the training, but I'm trying to think something that I really loved that's more for like wrestlers. I love Purposeful Primitive, but it certainly has a powerlifting type of feel for it. Marty Gallagher's book was great. The original Secrets of Soviet Sports and Fitness Training. Now it's Secret of Russian Sport and Fitness Training. That was such a great book. Oh man. I loved Arnold Schwarzenegger's book, but that's bodybuilding, so that might not really impact those guys. But No BS Time Management, Turning Pro, even though Turning Pro is for like entrepreneurs and writers, it's about life. It's about when you're done with mediocrity on all fronts of your life. So No BS Time Management, Turning Pro. I want to give them a training book that I love. I'll have to look at my bookshelf to really share something with them. Of course, I love a lot of the old books. One book was called The Mighty Atom. It was about, the guy, the Mighty Atom, who grew up in Coney Island, and he was like that performing strongman. But it was really interesting to hear how he like treated other people, the way he ate, the way he trained. The Way to Live by George Hackenschmidt was a tremendous book, which was written in like 1908 or maybe 1913. That was a great book because that's a autobiography on his wrestling and life, as well as a training manual. So I love a lot of these older books, and now people have reprinted those books so you could find them on Amazon. So it's a tough one for me to recommend a training book for those guys. Tough one.
It's tough for me too, because it's like, all my training knowledge is like consolidated from a whole bunch of different books, and then from
Yes.
learning,
And
just learning from trainers, like you, following trainers like you, and then like mastermind. And like, to me, this
yes.
is a mastermind session, and it's like, I'm learning from guys like you. I'm learning from, the Brands brothers. I'm learning from Gable. I got to learn a ton from Lloyd over the years. I was in Maryland for a long time, and I was like Master Lloyd's right-hand man for a while, and then the head kids coach at his school, Donald Aiknick, we coached the kids together out there. And, I've learned from these great coaches over the years. And it really is hard for me as well. If someone asks me for a specific book,
Jim, that's really what these guys want to do, is they should consolidate their learning from the greats. And so if you're consuming too much YouTube and too much Instagram, you're going to really struggle, because there's so much misinformation out there. But you're going to Gable, who could now tell you not only what he did do, but now he's looking back saying, wow, I think I did this wrong.
Yeah.
Or, of course, Terry talking about how he could have trained too hard, which is, we never would have said those things, but now we look back and say, damn, I think I ran my body down. So, and then if you kind of use that phrase with kids today, they might kind of really run with it in the wrong direction. Hey, I trained too hard. Don't train too hard. All right, I won't do jack shit this week then. It's like, no, I that's not what I'm talking about, So the ability to learn, standing on shoulders of giants is the best way. That's the truth.
Well, I think that's a great place to end this. But our relationship isn't going to end. I'd like to catch up with you soon.
Yes.
I'd like to write a book with you too. I know you're super.
I know.
But it would be really cool to get with you. I know we've talked about that before. But,
yeah.
There's probably a pretty cool way that we could get going and write a strength book. And
I'm shocked you haven't written your own book yet.
I know, man. People have been on me about it, and so we'll be coming out with a book. I'll be finishing up a book here soon.
Yeah, sorry, the train is just going by here. My gym is actually, the back door goes to the train tracks. It's a little crazy. When I first was writing my book, it was just a training book. But then Hurricane Sandy hit, and I started thinking about, do I just want a book about training? Because, and that was a while ago that I wrote it, 5-6 years ago. And I was like, do we need more books on how to squat and how to pick up a sandbag? Or do I need a book that's going to inspire people and change their lives? And so that's why I wanted to kind of share stories and make it part autobiography, very much like The Way to Live. The book I mentioned earlier by George Hackenschmidt, which was written, in those early 1900s. Just closing this here. So that's what I would be writing if I were you. I think the ability to share your story is the ticket.
Right. I have a lot written, actually. It's funny, but I just kind of don't
every day.
Out, so.
Well, I think, Jim, that's where Turning Pro comes in. Is like every day you have to write, whether you feel like it or not. And sometimes that's how training is. you know. So I don't want to push people to train when they're really legit run down and injured. But writing for sure is like, hey, you gotta get it done. So I gotta cut out also, Jim. I think my phone is like below 10%. So I don't know if it's gonna shut off on me here.
Well, hey, thanks a lot, man. You know, it was great having you.
Great.
And, you know, I appreciate this. I'm going to do what I can to get you the recording of this video. You can do what you want. This was great stuff. It's going to help our members out a lot. I know they're really appreciative of it.
Nice.
Thanks, Matt. You got anything?
Just thanks for coming on, Zach.
Matt, thanks, bro. Great meeting you. And Jim, hopefully we catch up soon. Where's the Nationals next year, Jim?
That's a good question. I don't know off the top of my head.
forgot.
I forget. I should know, but I don't know.
Okay.
I'll message you. Hopefully we can
All
catch
right.
up there,
We'll be in touch. We'll figure out a way to connect.
for sure. All right,
All right, guys. Thank you.
See ya.
Easy, thanks.
Bye, guys.